Can you guys round of applause for Kyle? Man, what an amazing, amazing story. I know some of you can probably relate to that. And so if you are ever in the spot where you would just like to share your story of who Jesus is and what he's done in your life, man, we would love to capture that and share that with our church body. And because it's just an encouragement. It's an encouragement when we can talk about our experiences and of what Jesus has done and share that with the world. It's one of the most powerful things that we have. And it ties in great for today's message, talking about impacting the world with the things that God has given to us. And so I want to start here this morning, though. When I was in middle school, every year there was what was called honor roll. So if you had gotten a certain amount of GPA, you got to go on a field trip provided by the school. And so every year there was a field trip in the spring semester to what was called Boomers Family Fun Center. And what Boomers was, it was kind of like there was go-karts and bumper boats, laser tag, putt-putt. But the whole reason that little Eric wanted to go to Boomers was for one reason and one reason only. That was to hit up the arcade and win as many tickets as I possibly could. Because at the end of the day, I wanted to brag to all my friends on the way home. I wanted to show up my sister of how she was terrible at video games and I was far superior. And so when we would get there for the field trip, they would give you this bag that had everything you needed for the whole day. Had coupons for riding all the rides, had coupons for putt-putt, had coupons for pizza, and then you get a small bag of tokens. What I had understood is that more tokens equated to more tickets. And so I'm like a drug dealer on the bus being like, yo, I'll slide you my pizza token or my pizza coupon if you give me 10 of your tokens. I'll give you my laser tag coupons if you give me all of your tokens. Like I'm just swiping left and right because it's like I need as many tokens as possible. And this one particular day went by and I had amassed just shy of 2,000 tickets, which meant that when I stepped up to the prize counter, it was going to be like a whoa, bam. And they were going to be so impressed, I thought. And so I'm just like carrying around my huge bag of tickets and everyone's coming up to me. Eric, you're just so amazing. How did you get all these tickets? And I'm just kind of, walking around, shrugging it off like, I'm just the real deal. It's all good. And my sister, who was 2 years older than me, she came up and she hadn't won a single ticket all day. And we were about to leave and she had one token left because she had wasted her tokens on the stupid games that didn't actually give you tickets. And she's like, what do I do with this one? And I was like, I don't know, just put it in a random game and just hope you win something so you get one of those like finger traps or a box of nerds or whatever. And so she goes up to this game that was called the Tornado. If you've been to like Jupiter's or whatever, they've still got this similar game, which is this light that just runs around and you put in a token and then you slap the button, hoping to stop it as close as you can to the middle to get the jackpot. And so I watched my sister walk up to the Tornado and I think to myself, this dummy, like this is the worst use of a token that you can to get any amount of tickets. And she walks up, she pushes it, and she's not really paying attention. And I was like, you have to hit the button. And she finally slaps the button, hits the jackpot, over 2,000 tickets. Just starts to spill out. So many tickets that a worker had to come and put more in the machine to continue. And so when we get home that day, my mom was like, how'd it go? Da, da, da. And I am distraught because I was like, I spent all day. I didn't even eat yet. And my sister had one token and she got more tickets than me. Like, this is just crazy. I share that story because our life and our faith is kind of like that. That there will come a point in eternity where you and I will have to take our proverbial tickets to the counter and give account to what we did with them. That there will come a point in which we will stand before Jesus and he will, in some form or fashion, ask us this question: what did you do with what I gave you? With this whole entire life, with the time, the skills, the expertise, your story, the money, everything that I entrusted to you, how many tickets, so to speak, did you gain my kingdom? What did you do with what I entrusted to you? And how well did you steward it for my glory? And that's what we're going to do and talk about today is how do we hear that phrase, well done, good and faithful servant, at the end of our lives when we spend eternity with Jesus. So if you have a Bible, Matthew chapter 25. Matthew chapter 25 is going to be our main text for today. If you can turn there with me, that'd be great. First book of the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Look for the four dudes, the four horsemen of the gospel, if you want to call them that. They collectively give us the story of the ministry and the life and the purpose of Jesus. As you're turning to Matthew, that's going to be dangerous. One of the things I want to note, just real quick, here at the 9 a.m. service, you can all look around and see that it's pretty full, yeah? And so a couple things that we want to take note is, number one, is if you have any flexibility to come to our 10:30 service, we would love that. We would highly appreciate that to kind of just continue to open up more space for new guests and new people checking out our church. That would be just so good. That'd be so appreciative. On top of that, as you come in, I think most of you do a really good job, but if you can, sit towards the front. I know that's like heresy, like, and scoot in towards the middle whenever you see space there. But just want you to know that we see it, we are aware of it, and come the new year, we have some new opportunities for us that will help alleviate some of that. And so, man, it's a good problem to have. Am I right? It's a good thing to be like, hey, we're kind of out of room. Can you come to the other time? It's not because we don't love you. You know, the 10:30 is a more spiritual service. I've come to find out. So just so you know there. But yeah, so the main part for today, Matthew 25, something interesting about this parable that we're going to read is it's the last parable that Jesus gives. I want you to think about that for a moment. It is not the last teaching that Jesus provides, but it is the last parable, short story that Jesus is using to make a point. And so here he is at the end of 3 years of ministry, at the end of 3 years of miracles, at the end of 3 years of his purpose being known to the world. He's going to wrap it up, put a bow on top with this final parable, this final teaching about the kingdom of heaven. And this one story is going to kind of be like this sending off. With everything that I've done, with everything that I've taught and showed you, this is how I want you to respond. So we're picking up in Matthew chapter 25. We're starting in verse 14. If you're there, say there. Got your pens at the ready. This is a good one, guys. I'm looking forward to this one this morning. It goes like this. It says, again, you can go ahead and write kingdom of heaven. If your translation says the word it there, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. Now I'm going to pause real quick because verse 14 is kind of the setup for the rest of the story. Here in verse 14, it says, again, Jesus is continuing on this teaching about the kingdom of heaven. And it's a very important teaching because that is the whole reason why Jesus came in the first place. If we go to the Gospel of Mark chapter 1, Mark starts the whole thing off saying, the kingdom of heaven has now come. The kingdom of heaven is here. And what that is a representation of is God's plan, God's will, God's desire to see heaven and earth begin to intertwine like God intended it to be so. You see, I think we sometimes misunderstand the whole point of Jesus and the gospel as, well, I just need to get my get out of hell free pass, get that ticket punched so I can go on living my life and go to the good place and not the bad place. Yet the whole thrust of Jesus' ministry, the whole thrust of the gospel is Jesus showing that heaven is now invading earth. And as disciples and as a church, we have a chance and an opportunity to help in that process of redemption. That what Jesus wants to do, even more than get us to heaven someday when we die, is for us to partake in getting sin and brokenness and guilt and shame out of our lives here and now and out of the world around us. It's such a powerful thing. And so when Jesus says, hey, remember the kingdom of heaven, the whole reason I came is for you to partake in this mission with me to bring goodness and shalom, that word that means peace, joy, unity of the world, of heaven and earth coming together. This is what I want you to remember. And so he sets up this scene, and there is a master who entrusts to his servants his wealth. And just for clarity purposes, so that you don't misunderstand, the master in this story is Jesus. You and I are the servants. And we have been entrusted great wealth. And again, this isn't a message so much about money as it is many things that we'll see that God has given us so that we can partake in seeing heaven and his spirit and his love and his joy push out the brokenness of why he came in the first place. And so Jesus continues. We're going to pick up in verse 15. He says, so to one of the servants, he gave 5 bags of gold. Everyone say 5 and hold 5 fingers. 5. To another, say 2 bags. And to another, 1. Pick 1 finger, okay? Yeah. And each according to his, you can circle this word, ability. Then he, the master, went on his journey. And the man who received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the one who had received 1 bag went off. And he dug a hole in the ground, and you can underline this word, he hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. And the man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Your translation might say, come and enter my joy or enter my presence. Then the man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. And his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, and so I will put you in charge of many things. Same thing, come and share in your master's happiness. Then, dun, 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 the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew. Pay attention to this word. I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown. Okay, that's a little odd. And gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out, and here it is again, I hid your gold in the ground. So here is what belongs to you. And his master replied, you wicked and lazy servant. So you knew this about me, my heart, my will, my desire, that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have at least received it back with some interest. So take the bag of gold from him who gave and give it to the one who has 10 bags. It's an interesting parable that Jesus leaves us with, and it's all surrounded with this idea of bags of gold. Now, how many of your translations, show of hands, don't use the word bags of gold, but it says talents? How many of you guys, your translation says the word talents? You see, back then, a talent was referred to as a bag of gold. And it could have meant anywhere from $1,000 to 20 years' wages. And so, in the grand scheme of things, this is a lot of money, but the word talent used from bag of gold is the word that we get today for the talents that we have in life. The skills, the passion, the desires, the education, everything that you have to see righteousness and joy and happiness come your way. Those are what talents are being referred to here. And the master essentially looks at all of his servants and he presents them with an opportunity. You are going to be given talents of varying kinds and amounts. But it is up to you to decide, will you be rewarded or will you be rebuked? And will you be rewarded by entering into my joy and my happiness with me, or will you be rebuked and those things taken away and given to someone else? So let me just say to you this morning is that God wants to use you and what you have to make an impact for the harvest of the kingdom of heaven. I don't want to understate that. I don't want any of us to miss that. Is that God has given you talents, abilities, time, resources, money, friends, family, things around you to make an impact for his kingdom. The question you and I have to wrestle with is, whose kingdom am I going to be living for? So I have three thoughts from this text this morning of how do we hear from God? How do we stand before him and give him our tickets and say, this is what I did with the tokens you gave to me, Lord? And we hear that phrase, well done, good and faithful servant. Thought number one for me is that we need to remember what's been entrusted to us and who it's from. He says, each of the servants was given according to their abilities. It was given according to their abilities, not their desires, not their hopes, their wants, their wishes, not what they felt like they deserved, not what somebody else told them they were capable of, that they were given what the master wanted them to have. Another way to understand this is that the master knows his servants and gives appropriately to the capability of what they can do for the kingdom of heaven. And the more we begin to use and steward what he has given us, he will continue to entrust us with more. Namely, we have a good God who likes to give good gifts to his servants as his children. James, the half-brother of Jesus, puts it this way in James chapter 1, verse 17. He says, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. So I think we need to always remember and look at our life and ask ourselves, how did what I have in front of me get here in the first place? I read a story this week about a woman who dialed 911 in Kitsap, Washington, because she was having an issue with her property. And so she dials 911, she calls up, and the operator's like, what's going on? And she says, my property has been overrun with raccoons. And she was like, oh, okay, that's kind of normal. We live in Washington. There's a lot of greenery. She's like, no. Not just a few raccoons, over 100. Check this out. Here's a picture of her property that she took in her backyard. Over 100 raccoons, so much so that whenever they were hungry at night, they would scratch at her door and paw at her windows. She could not get into her vehicle without being violently attacked by dozens of them. And so she calls them up and she's like, you guys, you got to send somebody out to solve this because this is just completely getting out of hand. And so finally animal control shows up and there's a video of the guy, he's just standing there observing, I don't know what to tell you. You just got to move. Just put the house on the market. You're out of luck. And finally, he begins to ask her do you have any idea or any recollection of why these raccoons got here in the first place? And she sat and she thought about it. She's like, well, 10 years ago. And he's like, 10 years ago? I started to feed a family of them. And then eventually, I guess just today was the day they brought all their friends. I didn't intend for it to end up this way in the first place. Why do you have what you have in the first place? But did you know that all that you have is intended by God to make a difference for his kingdom? The master has set up you and I, his servants, for success, not failure. He has placed talents before us, and we must never lose sight of whose they are and what they are for everything is his and can be used for a harvest as long as we put his kingdom first. We must always remember what's been entrusted to us and who it came from. Leads me to thought number 2 this morning, is that our impact is to be faithful with all that's entrusted to us. Emphasis on the word faithful. Turn to your neighbor and say faithful. If you don't have a neighbor, just shout it out at me. Just say faithful. Faithful. Thanks, Mitchell. Faithful. One servant got 5. One servant got 2. The third servant got 1. And the one who had 5 went and gathered 5 more. The servant with 2 talents gathered 2 talents more. But the third servant is the one who hid the bag, and he was the one who was scolded. You notice he was not scolded because, why can't you just be like the 5 guy? Why can't you be like your older brother, your older sister? Why couldn't you just be holy like them? Why can't you just be righteous like they are? No. He wasn't scolded because he didn't bring 5 with his 1. He was scolded because he did nothing with it, because he wasn't being faithful. You see, God grades us all on a scale. And that scale is faithfulness of what's been entrusted to us. Faithfulness in the kingdom of heaven is the metric, not amount. And let me say this, is that nothing squanders faithfulness more than comparison. When I look at my life, and I'd venture you would think the same too, is nothing squanders the ability to be faithful with what God has given us quicker or faster than when we compare what we have to what others have. Comparison kills our mission, our purpose. It kills our identity at times. Comparison kills our ability to be faithful and to see what we have been entrusted with as a gift from God to be used. One of my favorite podcasts to listen to is this podcast called Business Wars. And it's this series of like mini podcasts that talks about all of these companies that kind of go head to head and why, like DC versus Marvel Comics. How many of you guys are Team DC Comics? Like none of you, okay? Wow. How many of you Marvel people, right? Like everybody, we get it. They make better movies, okay. And then, okay, how about Starbucks, Team Starbucks? Give a hoot and holler. Team Duncan? Thank you. Like neither, right, is the correct answer. Like local Mad Goat. How many of you guys like Mad Goat in the area? That's right. Those are my people. There's like 7 on like Facebook and all of their like enemies. Facebook versus Instagram, Facebook versus Twitter, Facebook versus Snapchat, so on down the floor. One of my favorite, though, was this kind of one-off they did on this company, this old restaurant called Bill Knapp's. Bill Knapp's. How many of you guys, anybody in here ever eat at a Bill Knapp's at some point in their life? Okay, a few hands. It was a chain mainly in the Midwest that eventually had a few franchises down in the South and Florida, and they were known for being a family-friendly, made-from-scratch restaurant. Specifically, their cakes and dessert is what set them apart. Now, in about 1996, they were going through a change of ownership, and they noticed that majority of their patrons were the elderly population. And so the new owners wanted to kind of get younger and hipper and make sure their business didn't die. And so in 1998, they changed everything about their restaurant. They changed the slogan, the decor, the menu. They began to play loud music inside. They had TV and video games. And 4 years later, by 2002, all of them were completely closed down. All because what they did have and what was working for Bill Knapp's, and they said, well, we want to be like B-Dubs. We want to compete with those restaurants, with the Johnny Rockets or whatever it is, that's what led to their demise. That comparison is the quickest way to no longer make an impact of what is before us. Because here's the thing, God isn't going to judge you and or reward you based on my gifts. In the same way, God isn't going to hold me accountable to your gifts and your talents. It's going to be to what he has given to us. He's going to look at me one day when I stand before him. He's going to, Eric, what did you do with what I gave to you? With the money I gave to you, the time I gave to you, the relationships I gave to you, with that gift to preach that I gave to you, with the people around you. What did you do with what I gave to you? The experiences that you went through, the burdens that you bore, the stories that you are able to tell of how I am faithful and am good and I am a generous God. What did you, Eric, do with what I, God, gave to you, Eric? Like, he's not going to say, Eric, what did you do with what I gave to Steve? Eric, what did you do with what I entrusted to Sally? No, he's going to say, Eric, what did you do with what Eric was entrusted with? And so I just want you to know this morning, like pastorally, because I love you, and I think sometimes we miss this, is that I believe you have immense opportunity for God, perhaps even more than you know or understand or recognize. And again, this message isn't about financials. I think it's so much more about the other things that we have been given in life. The time, the skills, the opportunity, the relationships. I think one of the biggest things that you have been given is your story of faith. That there are people in here who are wrestling and struggling with similar things. And your ability to capture your story and share it sows and reaps for the kingdom of heaven. I think about Kyle's story that we saw earlier. He's not the only guy whose story kind of resembles that. He's not the only person who can say, man, if I would have known it was okay to ask God big questions. If I would have known it's okay to wrestle with doubts and struggles. If I would have been able to meet somebody, man, I might have been into this thing that much sooner. One of the greatest things, please hear me when I say it, that you have to share with the world, to partake in that kingdom harvest is your story. That you have a story to tell that can plant seeds, that can water gardens so that the harvest is abundant for the kingdom of heaven. Because what I know in my life is that when I get through a trial, or when I experience something new, or when there is a burden that is lifted, the ability to come out the other side and say, I have tasted and seen that the Lord is good. I have tasted and seen that the Lord can still be good through the losing of a parent at a young age. I have tasted and seen that the Lord can be good when you go through a traumatic physical ailment. I have tasted and seen that the Lord can still be good when you hold your 6-week premature child in your hands, unsure if they will live. I've tasted and seen that when that same child a year later is seizing for over an hour in the emergency room, that the Lord is still good. And you are just like me in the sense that you have story. You have talent to share with the world that there is a master who loves his sons and daughters and invites us to partake. And my point is this, is that God grades on a scale of faithfulness. Our abilities will never be the same, but our ability to make an impact is the same nonetheless. Which leads me to thought number 3 this morning, which is impact. This idea of leaving maybe a footprint on this earth is about hearing well done, not well kept. It's about hearing that phrase, well done, good and faithful servant. Not well kept, or I like what you did there, or you invested wisely, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Well done. You leveraged, you used all that I entrusted to you to partake in my harvest. You see, the first 2 servants heard well done. The third servant was called wicked, lazy. What did you do with what I gave you? Oh, you did nothing. You did nothing with it. And it sounds kind of harsh, right? Like, I don't know if you're with me, but like when I read through that part of the text and I get to that part, and his master replied, verse 26, you wicked and lazy servant. I'm like, Can we just like change the words? Can we just say, you good intended servant? Can we just say you just kind of missed the point a little bit? No, he's like, you wicked, lazy servant. There's an exclamation point. That's why I got louder. Punctuation matters. You wicked, lazy servant, Jesus says. And my mind is like goes to like Final Jeopardy. Okay? Kids, Jeopardy is this great TV show that like took over the world for like decades. I think it's still going on. They tried Aaron Rodgers at one point. That obviously didn't work. Anyways, the super smart guy named Ken runs it now, I think. I don't know. Anyways, squirrel. Okay, so Jeopardy, right? Final Jeopardy. Like all the points you amassed, you have the opportunity to wager them on the final question. And so when I get to this part, like my mind goes to Final Jeopardy. Well, the first 2 wagered everything and they happened to get it right. The third guy, at least he didn't wager it all and get the question wrong. Like at least there's something. Like shouldn't it be like way worse? If it was like, hey, third servant, come on, let's pony up. And he's like, cool. So, funny story. Bitcoin was like popping off. And I just, oh yeah, there's like this business and I thought I could do, sorry. So I don't really like have anything left for you. Like I think my mind goes to it like it could have been worse. And yet he was still regarded as a wicked and lazy servant. What's the big deal? Verse 24 is the big deal. Verse 24 is the big deal. I knew, Master. I knew that you are a hard man, desiring to harvest all over the place, even where you hadn't scattered seed. And there is the connection with the kingdom of heaven. You pick up on that? I knew, Master, that your heart, that your mission, your desire of why you're even entrusting us with stuff in the first place was to see a harvest to where you couldn't even get. Jesus lived his life in about a 20-mile radius in Israel in the Middle East 2,000 years ago. Did you know we live more than 20 miles away from there? Yeah, we do. Okay, sorry. Some of you so here's this idea. We are harvesting for the kingdom of heaven where Jesus never set foot. And so that's why it's a big deal. Is the one servant says to the master, I knew that this is who you were. This is what you wanted. You wanted to see this abundant harvest where you would never partake. And he said, yeah, because you knew that, I thought you were in. You were in my field in the first place. You claimed to be one of my servants. That's the big deal. That's the issue, because what's lost here isn't silver and gold. It's souls and prodigals that the harvest wants back. That's why this servant is seen as wicked and lazy, not because they had one and they brought back one, not because there was one and they didn't bring back five, not because they compared, but because what is at stake. Jesus is saying this is a big deal. I gave you what I gave you to make an impact. And I thought because you were on my team, I thought because you were in my servitude that you understood my heart. That you understood my desire. You understood what was at stake. I spoke life into you, grace into you, forgiveness into you, spiritual gifting into you, and purpose, and people, and time, and money, and resources. And what did you do with it? Oh, you buried it. Because why? Because that was easy? Because that was comfortable? Because you're lazy? Because you're wicked? Third servant, I'm not upset because you didn't come back with five. Third servant, I'm not upset because you didn't come back with two. Third servant, my heart is broken because I thought it broke like mine did. You claim to know me. You claim that you know I want to see a harvest, even where I have never set foot. That's why I gave you what I gave you. That is my hope, my goal, my purpose for all that you have. The Apostle Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. How do we hear that phrase, well done and good and faithful servant? How do we live our lives with everything God has entrusted us with, like the servant of the five or the servant of the two? I think it simply comes down to this, is you let the Holy Spirit get more of you. You let the Holy Spirit get more of you, of your heart and your mind and all that you have, because all that you do have has been entrusted to make a difference for his harvest. Because he wants to see an abundant harvest in every tribe, every tongue, every nation, every soul, every heart. Because he is a good God who wants to see his kingdom expand. And so we could talk about time and how to use your time better. That's something we all have. We all have been given money to various amounts that we can invest into the kingdom of heaven. We've all been given experiences and spiritual gifts that we need to invest in the kingdom of heaven. But just like even make it more practical. Like if I had a baseball in my hands, it's worth the cost of a baseball. $4, $5, $6, whatever it costs. A baseball in the hands of Shohei Ohtani, my son's favorite baseball player, is worth, get this, $700 million. That's a lot of cheese. Some of you, there is a baseball placed in your hands, but it's not to make $700 million. It's to impact dozens of young lives. Because you show up when they don't have a father or a mother, and you will be that example to them, and you will show them love and grace and compassion and care for them that they desperately need. A paintbrush in my hand is worth like negative money. Like I am the least artistic person you will ever meet. But some of you, a paintbrush in your hands is the ability to show joy and happiness and to paint pictures that unite families and things that can be remembered and express God's inexpressible glory. A guitar or drumsticks in my hands is probably even worth less than a paintbrush. But for some of you, it's an opportunity to share in his goodness, to lead others, hundreds, thousands, in countless hours of praise for him. A pair of scissors in my hands is good for cutting things, like paper, and that's probably about it. Others of you, it's something that's been placed in your hands to start a business, a salon, because when people sit in your chair, you have the opportunity to build a relationship with them over time. You take what's been put in your hands, a pencil, a scalpel, a business ledger, an ability to create things, Photoshop, Illustrator, you name it. There are things that have been placed into your hands that you have the opportunity to see kingdom harvest. But I think the thing that we all have in our grasp is our story of who God is, a story of how God found us and people around you to share that with. Because when we give God our whole life to make an impact, surrender to the Spirit, he responds with the fullness of his work for the harvest of the kingdom of heaven. We're going to continue to worship this morning as we set up our time for communion.